A little boy hugged a scared stray cat in the rain, then witnesses saw something left them in tears. What happens when a child's simple act of empathy towards a scared animal is answered with unwavering loyalty? When lonely Noah hugs a terrified stray cat in a storm, witnesses expect it to flee. But the shocking twist is what the cat does next, an act that leaves them breathless and sparks an incredible journey of healing for a grieving boy. Subscribe, like, and listen now to the touching story of Noah's rainy day friend. Thunder rattled the windows of the cozy suburban house, each clap echoing the gray emptiness inside 7-year-old Noah Miller. He sat curled on the window seat in the living room, knees drawn to his chest, watching sheets of rain lash against the glass, blurring the familiar view of Maple Street into impressionistic streaks of green and gray. It had been raining for hours, a relentless spring downpour mirroring the quiet storm that had settled over their home since Buddy, his beloved golden retriever, had unexpectedly passed away 2 months prior. Noah traced a raindrop's path down the pane with a small finger, his silence a heavy presence in the room. His mom, Karen, worked quietly on her laptop at the dining room table, occasionally glancing over, her brow furrowed with a familiar worry. He'd become even quieter since Buddy was gone, retreating further into his own sensitive world, his usual childhood chatter replaced by watchful silence. Suddenly, a movement outside caught Noah's eye, jarring him from his listless observation. Beneath the sprawling azalea bush near the edge of the front lawn, a patch of sodden orange fur trembled violently. It was Rusty, the neighborhood's notoriously timid stray cat. Noah had seen him before, a fleeting flash of Ginger disappearing under porches or across fences, always wary, always distant. Now, Rusty was trapped by the deluge, plastered against the dark, wet earth, eyes wide with terror as another peal of thunder cracked overhead. He looked small, helpless, utterly alone in the face of the storm's fury. Something resonated deep within Noah, that feeling of being small, scared, and alone in a world that suddenly felt too loud and overwhelming. Without a word, without conscious thought, he slid off the window seat. His bare feet padded silently across the carpet towards the front hall closet. He pulled on his bright yellow raincoat and his favorite frog-themed rubber boots, the familiar actions automatic. "Noah, honey, where are you going?" Karen asked, looking up from her screen, distracted. "Outside," Noah murmured, his voice barely audible, his hand already on the front doorknob. "But it's pouring and thundering." "Stay inside where it's safe," Karen cautioned. But Noah didn't seem to hear her. His gaze was fixed on the shivering orange form under the azaleas. He opened the door, the wind immediately whipping rain onto the entryway floor. Before Karen could react further, he slipped outside, pulling the door shut behind him, leaving his mother staring after him with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. What was he doing, and why was he so determined to go out into that raging storm? Life on Maple Street, in their pleasant Midwestern town, had always felt safe and predictable for Noah, until Buddy, the goofy, perpetually happy golden retriever, had been Noah's shadow, his confidant, his furry brother, since Noah was a toddler. His sudden illness and rapid decline just 2 months ago had been Noah's first real encounter with profound loss, and it had hit him hard. Already a naturally quiet and sensitive child, Noah seemed to withdraw even further after Buddy's death. The boisterous energy faded, replaced by a quiet watchfulness, a reluctance to engage, a sadness that shadowed his usually bright blue eyes. His parents, Karen and Tom, tried everything: extra cuddles, favorite activities, gentle conversations. But grief had wrapped itself around their son, making him retreat into a shell they struggled to penetrate. Karen, working part-time from home as a graphic designer, watched him constantly, her heart aching. She worried about his lack of interaction at kindergarten, his solitary play in the backyard, the way he sometimes just sat, staring into space, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. She knew healing took time, but his persistent quietude felt heavy, concerning. The neighborhood itself was unremarkable in the best way. Tree-lined sidewalks, kids riding bikes in good weather, neighbors exchanging friendly waves. There were the usual suburban creatures, including a few stray cats who navigated the alleys and yards. Most were fleeting glimpses, but the orange one, nicknamed Rusty by some neighbors due to his slightly scruffy appearance, was particularly elusive. He was a fixture, yet barely seen, known for bolting at the slightest sound or sudden movement. Karen had occasionally seen him near their trash cans and shooed him away, more concerned about mess than anything else. She knew Mrs. Peterson, their elderly neighbor 2 doors down, sometimes left food out for him, a habit Karen privately thought probably wasn't wise, but didn't interfere with. Rusty was simply part of the background noise, a wild thing best left alone. The inciting incident unfolded as Noah stepped out into the driving rain. It wasn't a conscious decision born of logic, but an instinctive response of pure empathy. Seeing Rusty, terrified and trembling under the bush, Noah didn't see a dirty stray or a potential scratch hazard. He saw another being, small and scared, overwhelmed by the storm, just as Noah felt overwhelmed by his own internal storm of grief. The cat's vulnerability mirrored his own. In that moment, the shared feeling of being helpless and alone transcended species. His quiet sadness found an external focus, a tangible creature he could try to comfort, perhaps in a way he himself wished to be comforted. His goal wasn't complex, it was primal. See fear, offer comfort. Step out into the rain, offer a hug. It was the purest form of connection his young, hurting heart could offer. And so, pulling the hood of his raincoat tighter, he started walking slowly, deliberately, across the soggy lawn towards the terrified orange cat huddled beneath the azaleas. "Noah, wait! Be careful!" Karen called out, rushing to the front door, holding it open just a crack against the wind and rain. Her heart pounded. She knew Noah's gentle nature, but Rusty was a stray, likely feral, and definitely terrified. Getting scratched or bitten was a real possibility. Across the street, through her own rain-streaked window, Mrs. Peterson also watched, her gardening forgotten, concern etched on her face. Noah didn't seem to register his mother's warning. He moved slowly, deliberately, his small rubber boots squelching on the saturated grass. He didn't approach Rusty head-on, but circled slightly, making himself appear smaller, less threatening. He stopped a few feet away from the azalea bush. Rain dripped from the brim of his yellow hood. "It's okay," Noah whispered, his voice soft, almost carried away by the wind. "It's just rain. Loud noises are scary." Rusty flinched at the sound, pressing himself flatter against the ground, ears pinned back, every muscle tense to flee. His green eyes were wide, darting nervously between the boy and the imagined dangers in the storm. Noah crouched down slowly, bringing himself closer to the cat's level. He didn't reach out immediately. He just stayed there, quiet, projecting an aura of calm he likely didn't feel inside. He started humming softly, a tuneless little melody that Buddy used to like. He hummed it for a long moment, letting the cat get used to his presence, his quiet energy. Karen watched, holding her breath. Mrs. Peterson leaned closer to her window. This was the critical moment. Would the cat bolt? Would it lash out? After what felt like an eternity, Noah slowly extended one small rain-gloved hand, palm upwards, towards the trembling cat. Rusty recoiled slightly, a low hiss rumbling in his chest, but he didn't run. Noah kept his hand steady, unwavering. He continued humming his soft tune, very slowly, almost imperceptibly. Some of the tension seemed to ease from the cat's body. He stopped trembling quite so violently. His gaze remained fixed on Noah, but the sheer terror began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Then, Noah did something incredibly brave, incredibly gentle. He shifted his weight forward slightly, still low to the ground, and slowly, slid his other arm around the cat's sodden body. He didn't grab or squeeze. It was an invitation, an offering of embrace. For a split second, Rusty tensed again, ready to fight or flee. Karen instinctively took a step forward onto the porch, ready to intervene. But then, the unthinkable happened. Instead of scratching or biting, Rusty seemed to collapse into the embrace. He let out a long, shaky sigh and hesitantly, incredibly, pressed his wet head against the slick yellow fabric of Noah's raincoat. He didn't purr, not yet, but he stopped trembling. He accepted the hug. Noah held him gently, stroking his wet fur, murmuring soft words of comfort. "See? It's okay now. You're safe." He stayed like that for several minutes, a small boy in a bright yellow raincoat, hugging a scared orange stray cat in the middle of a raging thunderstorm, creating a tiny island of warmth and safety amidst the downpour. Karen felt tears welling up, blurring her vision. Next door, Mrs. Peterson pressed a hand to her heart, equally moved. They were witnessing something pure, something profound, an act of unhesigned empathy, bridging the gap between a lonely child and a terrified animal, a moment of connection forged in the heart of the storm. The initial fear for Noah's safety dissolved, replaced by a wave of overwhelming tenderness and awe at her son's quiet capacity for kindness. The shared moment of quiet comfort couldn't last forever in the relentless rain. Karen knew Noah would catch a chill if he stayed out much longer, despite his raincoat. "Noah, honey!" she called out, her voice gentle but firm, trying not to startle the cat. "Time to come inside now." Noah looked up, his expression soft, reluctant. He gave Rusty one last gentle squeeze, then slowly, carefully, loosened his embrace. He didn't just dump the cat back under the bush. Instead, he gently lifted Rusty and carried him the few steps towards the covered front porch. He knelt again and placed the cat carefully onto the welcome mat, which was mostly dry, sheltered from the worst of the rain by the overhang. "You stay here where it's dry," Noah whispered to the cat, patting his damp head one last time. "It's safer here." Rusty looked up at him, blinking slowly, no longer radiating terror, but a kind of weary acceptance. "Noah, now!" Karen called again, a little more urgently, holding the front door open wider. Noah cast one last look at Rusty, then turned and ran, his boots splashing through puddles, back towards the warmth and safety of the house. He slipped inside, leaving wet footprints on the mat, pulling off his dripping raincoat as Karen quickly shut the door against the wind and rain. Karen immediately fussed over him, toweling his damp hair, checking to make sure he wasn't scratched, asking if he was cold. Noah submitted quietly, his thoughts seemingly still outside with the orange cat. "He was so scared, Mommy," he said softly, "like Buddy used to get during storms." "I know, sweetie. That was very kind of you to comfort him," Karen said, hugging him tightly, relief washing over her that he was unharmed. "But strays can be unpredictable. We need to be careful." As Karen bustled Noah towards the bathroom for a warm bath, her gaze flickered back towards the front window, as did Mrs. Peterson's from her own vantage point next door. Both women shared the same thought, the same expectation. Now that the boy, the source of comfort, was gone, the stray cat would surely vanish. It was the nature of feral animals, accept momentary kindness perhaps, but disappear back into the wild at the first opportunity, especially with the storm still raging. The brief connection was touching, beautiful even, but surely it was fleeting. They watched the porch, waiting for the inevitable flicker of orange fur bolting off the mat and disappearing back into the rain-lashed landscape. The turning point wasn't just Noah going inside. It was the sudden, shared suspense held by the witnesses. Had that simple hug forged a real bond, or was it just a momentary truce in the storm? What would Rusty do now? The rain continued its steady drumming against the roof and windows. Inside, Noah soaked in a warm bath. The immediate chill chased away, but his thoughts remained with the cat on the porch. Karen bustled around, making hot chocolate, tidying the entryway, yet her attention kept drifting back to the front window. Next door, Mrs. Peterson also found herself lingering by her living room window, abandoning the book she'd been trying to read. Both women watched the porch. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. Rusty didn't move. He remained curled in a tight, damp ball on the welcome mat, a small patch of vibrant color against the gray, wet concrete. He shook his head occasionally, sending droplets flying, and meticulously licked rainwater from his fur, but he made no move to leave the relative shelter of the porch overhang. His body was tense, alert, but he wasn't scanning for escape routes. Instead, his gaze seemed fixed on the front door of Noah's house. Karen felt a lump forming in her throat. This was unexpected, extremely unexpected. Strays didn't stay, especially not this notoriously skittish one. She glanced at Noah, now wrapped in a fluffy towel, sitting quietly on the sofa, also looking towards the front door. "He's still there," Noah whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. "I see that, honey," Karen murmured. Another half hour crawled by. The thunder had moved further away, but the rain remained steady. Rusty shifted position slightly, tucking his paws neatly beneath him, but stayed resolutely put. He looked like a small, furry gargoyle guarding the entrance. Mrs. Peterson, unable to contain her curiosity and emotion any longer, picked up her phone and called Karen. "Karen, dear, it's Evelyn Peterson next door," she began, her voice warm. "Are you seeing this? The cat. He hasn't budged." "I know, Mrs. Peterson," Karen replied, moving to the kitchen for a better view, phone tucked under her chin. "I can't believe it. Noah just gave him a quick hug and now he won't leave." "Oh, that Noah," Mrs. Peterson sighed, her voice thick with emotion. "He has such a kind heart. especially after losing little Buddy. Maybe, maybe this little fellow knows Noah needs a friend right now? The thought resonated deeply with Karen. She looked at Noah again, saw the quiet hope flickering in his eyes as he watched the steadfast cat on the porch. Her own pragmatic concerns about strays, fleas, vet bills, unpredictability seemed to momentarily recede in the face of this extraordinary display of loyalty. This wasn't just a cat seeking shelter. This felt like a choice, a connection made, accepted, and now being honored by the animal. The rain gradually softened from a downpour to a persistent drizzle as dusk began to settle. Still, Rusty remained. He looked cold, perhaps hungry, but utterly determined. He hadn't moved from the doormat. Karen found herself checking the window every few minutes. Noah had pulled a blanket around himself and was simply watching, silent and absorbed. The buildup wasn't one of increasing danger, but of increasing wonder and emotional weight. The cat's simple act of staying became more profound with each passing minute. It defied logic, defied instinct. It spoke of a bond formed instantaneously, powerfully. The question hanging in the air, felt intensely by both Karen and Mrs. Peterson, was no longer if the cat would leave, but what this unwavering vigil meant and what they should do about it. The silent, persistent presence of the orange cat on the porch became a powerful statement, building towards a decision point for Karen and Noah. As darkness fully enveloped the street, the porch light cast a warm yellow glow on the small, curled form still huddled on the doormat. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind glistening streets and dripping trees, but the air was cool and damp. Rusty hadn't moved an inch. He looked up as Karen approached the door from the inside, Noah trailing hopefully behind her. Karen looked down at her son, saw the quiet pleading in his eyes, the connection he clearly felt to the animal outside. She thought about the empty space Buddy had left, the silence that had filled their home. She looked through the glass at the unwavering loyalty of the stray cat who had received one simple act of kindness and seemed determined to repay it with steadfast companionship. Her heart made the decision before her head fully caught up. Pragmatism lost out to compassion, to the undeniable magic of the moment. "Okay," she whispered, more to Noah than herself. She knelt down and slowly, carefully, unlocked and opened the front door just a few inches. A waft of warm, dry air carrying the scent of home flowed out onto the porch. Rusty lifted his head, blinking in the sudden change of light and scent. He looked from Karen to Noah, his green eyes uncertain. He didn't bolt. He didn't hiss. He just watched, waiting. Karen reached down and placed a small saucer of milk, the only thing she could think of quickly, on the floor just inside the doorway. "You can come in if you want," she said softly, keeping her voice low and calm. "Just to warm up." Noah held his breath, his eyes wide with anticipation. Rusty stood up, stretched his stiff limbs, and took a tentative step towards the opening. He sniffed the air, sniffed the milk, looked back out at the damp darkness, then looked inside again at Karen and Noah. He took another step, placing one paw cautiously onto the indoor mat. He paused, surveyed the entryway. Then, with a final glance back at the porch, he walked purposefully inside the house. Karen gently closed the door behind him, sealing not just the house from the damp night air, but sealing the pact initiated hours earlier by a small boy's hug in the rain. The stray cat was inside. The vigil was over. A new chapter had begun. The change in Noah wasn't instantaneous, but it was profound, surprising everyone, including Karen and Tom. Rusty, as Noah insisted on calling him, adjusted to indoor life with surprising ease, as if he'd simply been waiting for the right invitation. After a mandatory vet check, revealing he was thankfully healthy, just underweight, he became Noah's constant shadow. Where Noah went, Rusty followed, a silent, comforting, orange presence. The most remarkable change was in Noah himself. The deep well of silence he'd retreated into after Buddy's death began to recede. He started talking again, first in whispers to Rusty, sharing secrets, telling him about Buddy, reading aloud from picture books while the cat purred on his lap. Rusty seemed to listen intently, occasionally blinking or rubbing his head against Noah's hand. Then, gradually, Noah started talking more to his parents, initiating conversations, asking questions, sharing details about his day at kindergarten. He started mentioning Rusty to Mrs. Peterson when he saw her outside, proudly pointing out his new friend sleeping in the window. Rusty's affection was quiet, but unwavering. He seemed to sense Noah's moods, curling up close when the boy seemed sad, batting playfully at Noah's toys to distract him, greeting him with enthusiastic meows and figure eights around his legs when he came home from school. Laughter, a sound Karen had desperately missed, began to echo in the house again as Noah tumbled on the floor with his energetic feline friend. He took pride in helping Karen feed Rusty, carefully measuring the kibble, making sure the water bowl was fresh. This small responsibility gave him a sense of purpose, of being needed. Neighbors noticed the difference. Noah, who used to hang back shyly, would now sometimes venture a small wave or a quiet hello when walking Rusty on his harness in the backyard, a precaution Karen insisted upon. He seemed lighter, happier, the sadness in his eyes replaced by a growing confidence. Mrs. Peterson often remarked to Karen over the fence, "That cat was just what that dear boy needed. It's like he brought the sunshine back after the rain." Karen knew it was true. The orange cat, who had sought shelter from a storm, had become a shelter for her son's grieving heart. The unlikely bond formed that rainy afternoon had done more than just save a stray. It had rescued Noah from his isolation, proving that sometimes the most profound healing comes not from grand gestures, but from the simple, unconditional love of a rainy day friend who decided to stay. The surprise wasn't just that the cat stayed on the porch, but that in staying, he opened the door to Noah's own hesitant return to the world. Looking back now, the transformation in Noah is still astonishing. A quiet rebirth nurtured by the persistent presence of his orange companion. Rusty, the stray who chose to stay, became more than just a pet. He became a confidant, a steady anchor in Noah's young life. Neighbors, especially Mrs. Peterson and Noah's parents, watched the transformation with quiet joy. The quiet boy, withdrawn into a shell of grief after the loss of Buddy, was now more animated, quick to smile, his voice more confident in conversation, usually starting with Rusty, then gradually expanding to the world around him. It was a testament to the profound power of connection, born from a moment of pure, unflinching empathy in the midst of a storm. Noah, in reaching out to soothe the fear he recognized in the trembling cat, had inadvertently opened a door for comfort to enter his own life. Rusty's unwavering guard on the porch that rainy evening was more than just loyalty. It was a response, a reflection of the safety and kindness Noah had offered. It was a silent promise of friendship that the cat made every day, with patient purrs, gentle head rubs, and an intuitive understanding of when Noah needed it most. The healing went both ways. Noah gave Rusty shelter and love, saving him from the harshness of life on the streets. In return, Rusty, with his unconditional love and steady presence, saved Noah from the depths of sadness, reminding him that hearts, even young ones broken by loss, can find a way to heal and trust again. The most surprising thing, the truth that still moves Noah's mother to tears sometimes, is not just that the cat stayed or that he got better. It is a beautiful, undeniable testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest comfort comes not from flowery words or complicated therapies, but from the simple, profound act of reaching out to another vulnerable being and finding yourself held in return. The rain that day washed away more than dirt. It cleared the way for healing, leaving behind the quiet miracle of a boy and his cat walking together in the world. A wolf attacks two lonely stray cats, and then the unimaginable happens. How far would one stray cat go to save another? When a vicious attack separates two inseparable feline friends, the brave one vanishes. But what happens next is truly unimaginable, leading to a desperate standoff against a starving predator. Subscribe, like, and listen now to hear the shocking twist and the heartwarming story of survival. Snow swirled in the twilight, blurring the line between the dense Colorado forest and the edge of Eleanor Vance's property. But the frantic sounds slicing through the evening calm were terrifyingly distinct. The high-pitched, desperate yowling of cats, the snarl of something much larger, and the crash of frantic bodies against the old wooden fence separating her small yard from the wild Eleanor froze mid-step in her kitchen, a mug of cooling tea forgotten in her hand. Her heart seized. The strays, Sunny and Shadow. She'd seen them just minutes before, two shadows huddled near the woodpile she kept stocked for the harsh mountain winters. Now chaos erupted from that exact spot. She rushed to the frosted kitchen window, wiping frantically at the condensation. The scene outside was a terrifying tableau of gray dusk, falling snow, and primal fear. A large dark shape, unmistakably wolf-like, gaunt and menacing, had cornered the two cats against the fence. Its breath plumed in the frigid air, low growls rumbling in its chest. Shadow, the smaller black cat, was pressed flat against the wood, paralyzed by terror. Sunny, the vibrant orange tabby, always the bolder of the two, stood slightly in front, back-arched fur, bristling, spitting defiance at the towering predator. Despite the overwhelming odds, it happened in a horrifying blur. The wolf lunged, not with calculated precision, but with a desperate, ragged hunger. Eleanor gasped, anticipating the inevitable. But Sunny moved like a flame, darting sideways toward the wolf's flank, yowling, drawing its attention for a critical second. In that instant, Shadow seemed to unfreeze, scrambling sideways along the fence line towards a narrow gap beneath the dilapidated garden shed. The wolf, momentarily diverted by Sunny's audacious move, snapped its jaws where the orange cat had been a heartbeat before. Then, enraged, it turned its full attention onto the fleeing orange form. Sunny didn't head for the shed. Instead, he bolted away from safety deeper along the fence line, then veered sharply right, disappearing into the thickening trees and falling snow at the forest's edge. The wolf, a larger, faster shadow, crashed after him, the sounds of pursuit, snapping branches, frantic, scrambling a final choked-off yowl, quickly swallowed by the woods and the muffling snow. Then silence. A heavy, dreadful silence that pressed in on Eleanor, broken only by the whistling wind and the frantic thumping of her own heart. Sonny was gone, led the beast away. And Shadow. Eleanor scanned the area frantically, her breath catching in her throat. Where was Shadow? Had the little black cat made it, or had the momentary distraction not been enough? The unimaginable had begun, leaving behind only fear and terrible uncertainty. Eleanor Vance had lived in the small cabin nestled against the Pike National Forest for 15 years, ever since her husband Frank had passed. She'd chosen this solitude, deliberately finding a measure of peace in the rhythms of the mountains, the changing seasons, the quiet company of the aspens and pines. She was in her late 60s, her movements slowed slightly by arthritis, but her eyes still sharp, accustomed to observing the subtle shifts in the natural world around her. She knew the deer trails, the calls of the Steller's jays, the rare tracks of bobcats or bears. She respected the wilderness, its beauty, and its inherent dangers, maintaining a careful distance. The two stray cats had appeared the previous spring, drawn perhaps by the scent of the compost bin or the relative shelter offered by her woodpile, and shed Sonny. The orange male was strikingly bright against the muted forest colors, possessing a bold curiosity that often bordered on recklessness. Shadow, the sleek black female, was his opposite, timid, watchful, rarely venturing far from Sonny's reassuring presence. Eleanor watched them from her window, noting their obvious bond. They hunted together, curled up together for warmth, groomed each other meticulously. Their interdependence was touching a small drama of survival playing out at her doorstep. She started leaving scraps out discreetly near the woodpile, not enough to make them dependent, just a little help against the lean times. She never tried to touch them, sensing their ingrained wildness, their need for space. They were part of the landscape like the deer or the squirrels, albeit needier ones. She'd found herself worrying about them during heavy snows or thunderstorms, relieved each time she spotted the flash of orange or the slip of black reappearing after the weather cleared. They were nameless observers of her quiet life, and she theirs. Now, standing numbly by the window, the image of Sonny darting into the woods pursued by that gaunt, wolf-like creature replayed in her mind. A wolf. It seemed unlikely, though not impossible, this close to the protected lands wolves generally avoided human habitation. But this one looked wrong. Too thin, too desperate. Maybe a feral dog or a wolf-dog hybrid, abandoned and starving. Whatever it was large, dangerous, and had almost certainly killed Sonny. The final choked yowl echoed in her memory. Her immediate concern shifted to Shadow. Had the little cat reached the safety of the shed? Eleanor pulled on her heavy boots, and Parka grabbed a flashlight despite the lingering twilight and stepped out into the biting cold. Snow crunched underfoot. She scanned the area near the fence, her light beam cutting through the falling flakes. No tracks near the shed gap. The fresh snow was already covering everything. Shadow, she called softly, "Kitty, kitty." A faint rustle came from beneath the shed. Eleanor knelt, aiming her flashlight into the dark, narrow space. Two luminous green eyes blinked back at her from the deepest corner, wide with terror. Shadow was alive, safe, but trapped by fear. Eleanor let out a shaky breath of relief, but the relief was immediately tempered by grief for Sonny. And the grim reality of the situation, Shadow couldn't stay under there. The predator might return, and the little cat, now alone, seemed utterly lost. Eleanor spent the next hour patiently coaxing Shadow out. She spoke in low, soothing tones, leaving a small bowl of tuna near the opening. Finally, driven by cold and perhaps a flicker of trust born from months of seeing Eleanor leave food, Shadow crept out, still trembling violently. She didn't run. She looked up at Eleanor, a tiny, bereft creature in the vast, snowy landscape. In that moment, Eleanor's carefully maintained distance dissolved. This wasn't just another wild creature anymore. This was a survivor, grieving and terrified, who had just lost her only companion, possibly due to an act of selfless bravery. Leaving Shadow to fend for herself now felt unthinkable, cruel. "Okay, little one," Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Okay, you're coming inside." Slowly, carefully she reached down. Shadow flinched, but didn't bolt. Eleanor gently scooped up the trembling cat, holding her close for warmth, feeling the frantic heartbeat against her own chest. The inciting incident wasn't a grand choice, but a simple, compassionate act. She carried Shadow inside, kicking the door shut against the cold, the wild, and the profound sense of loss, unknowingly setting a new course for her quiet life. Bringing Shadow inside was one thing, settling her was another. The little black cat was traumatized. Eleanor set up a temporary bed with soft blankets inside a large dog crate she still had from her old Labrador, leaving the door open. She placed food, water, and a makeshift litter box nearby, creating a small, secure haven in a corner of her living room. Shadow immediately retreated to the very back of the crate, refusing to emerge, eat, or drink. She just huddled there occasionally, letting out a low, mournful cry that tore at Eleanor's heart. Eleanor sat nearby, reading or knitting, speaking softly to the crate, letting Shadow adjust to the unfamiliar sounds and smells of the cabin. The ticking grandfather clock, the scent of wood smoke, the low murmur of the radio. She felt a heavy weight of guilt mixed with her sadness. Had leaving food out inadvertently endangered the cats, drawing them closer to the house, making them targets? And Sonny, his bravery haunted her. She scanned the snowy woods from her window, constantly hoping against hope to see a flash of orange, but knowing realistically that his chances had been slim to none. After 2 days, Shadow finally began to eat tentatively at first, then with more urgency. She started using the litter box, but still wouldn't leave the perceived safety of the crate unless Eleanor was out of the room. Progress was slow, measured in tiny steps, poking her head out. Taking a few cautious steps into the room, allowing Eleanor to sit a little closer. The grief was palpable. Shadow would often just stare towards the window, overlooking the woodpile where she and Sonny used to wait for Eleanor's offerings. Her green eyes filled with a searching, mournful look. Eleanor decided she needed to report the wolf sighting. She called the local ranger district office. Ranger Peterson, a young, earnest man, listened patiently. "We haven't had confirmed wolf pack activity in this immediate area, Mrs. Vance," he explained, "but it's not impossible for a lone disperser to pass through, especially if it's struggling. More likely, given the desperation you described, it could be a large feral dog or an escaped wolf dog. There have been a few sightings reported further north recently of something similar, gaunt, unusually bold." He advised her to be cautious, secure her trash, and not leave any pet food outside. "If you see it again, Call us immediately. Don't approach it." The ranger's words offered little comfort. Knowing the creature might still be lurking nearby put Eleanor on edge. Every creak of the cabin at night sounded like claws on wood. Every shadow outside seemed menacing. She reinforced the latch on the shed, made sure her windows were securely locked, and kept a can of bear spray near the back door, though the thought of actually using it terrified her. Her primary concern was keeping Shadow safe now. The cabin, once her sanctuary, now felt like a besieged outpost. One afternoon, while Eleanor was bringing in firewood from the porch stack, she saw them, large paw prints in the fresh layer of snow near the edge of her yard, circling the area around the shed and the woodpile. They were definitely canine, much larger than any fox or coyote tracks. The creature had come back sniffing around, perhaps searching for the cat it had missed, or drawn by lingering scents. Fear, cold and sharp, prickled down Eleanor's spine. She quickly retreated inside, locking the door firmly behind her. That night, she heard scratching sounds outside near the back porch. Shadow, alerted, let out a low hiss from her crate, fur bristling. Eleanor sat frozen, listening, bear spray clutched in her hand, until the sounds eventually faded away. Shadow's recovery seemed to stall. She remained withdrawn, jumpy at sudden noises. Eleanor worried the cat's spirit was broken without Sunny. She tried different foods, bought cat toys that Shadow ignored, spent hours just sitting near the crate, hoping her calm presence would help. The bond between them was forming, but it was fragile, overshadowed by loss and fear. Eleanor found herself talking to Sunny as if he were still there. "Your sister misses you terribly," she'd murmur towards the woods. "You were so brave." The grief felt heavy, a constant ache. She started researching online, looking for resources on helping traumatized animals, reading forums where people shared stories of pet loss. Nothing quite fit the strange, violent circumstances of Sunny's disappearance. The tension was palpable. The unseen predator was still out there. Shadow remained locked in her fear, and Eleanor felt increasingly isolated, responsible for this fragile life, while mourning the one presumed lost. The quiet solitude of her mountain life had been replaced by a gnawing anxiety and the constant low hum of fear. Something had to give. Nearly a week after the attack, a heavy snowfall blanketed the mountains, silencing the forest and trapping Eleanor indoors. The fresh snow seemed to amplify the quiet, making the cabin feel even more isolated. Shadow had finally ventured out of her crate more consistently, even allowing Eleanor to gently stroke her back while she ate. But she remained deeply subdued, her playful spirit seemingly extinguished. Eleanor watched the snow pile up outside, a sense of bleakness settling over her. She'd done everything she could for Shadow, but the little cat was only a shadow of her former self, without her vibrant orange companion. The loss of Sunny felt immense, a bright light snuffed out too soon. That evening, as dusk settled early, Eleanor was adding logs to the wood stove when she heard it, a faint scratching sound at the back door. Her blood ran cold. "It's back." She grabbed the bear spray, her heart pounding, and crept towards the door, peering through the small peephole. Shadow, sensing the tension or hearing the noise, hissed from her spot near the stove. But what Eleanor saw through the peephole wasn't the gaunt, dark shape of the predator. Instead, low against the doorframe was a patch of dirty, snow-matted orange. She blinked, disbelieving. It couldn't be. She fumbled with the locks, her hands shaking, and pulled the heavy wooden door open just a crack. a small shivering form huddled on her doorstep, looking up at her with weary, intelligent eyes. It was Sonny. He was thinner, his bright coat dull and clumped with ice and dirt, one ear torn and scabbed over, and he favored his right front paw. But he was unmistakably, miraculously alive. He let out a weak, questioning meow. Eleanor gasped, dropping the bear spray with a clatter. "Sonny! Oh my goodness, Sonny!" She flung the door open wide. Sonny limped painfully across the threshold, collapsing onto the welcome mat, utterly exhausted. Shadow, hearing Sonny's meow, darted out from behind the stove. She stopped dead, staring at the orange cat. Then recognition dawned. With a joyful chirp, she rushed forward, nudging Sonny, licking his face, circling him excitedly. Sonny responded with a weak purr, nuzzling her back despite his obvious pain. The reunion was instantaneous, profound, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy that brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. The unimaginable had happened, not death, but survival, not loss, but reunion. This changed everything. The grief that had weighed Eleanor down vanished, replaced by overwhelming relief and a fierce surge of protective determination. Sonny wasn't just a memory. He was here hurt and vulnerable, needing her care just as much as Shadow did, and the predator that had hunted him was still out there. Her role instantly shifted. She wasn't just comforting a traumatized survivor anymore. She was now the guardian of two precious lives tasked with nursing Sonny back to health, while defending them both against a persistent, known threat. She quickly shut and bolted the door, then gently examined Sonny. His injured paw needed attention. He was likely dehydrated and starving, possibly hypothermic. While Shadow continued her excited ministrations, Eleanor bustled around, creating another warm bed near the stove, fetching antiseptic wipes for the torn ear, warming some broth. She realized she couldn't just call Ranger Peterson and tell him the cat she'd presumed dead had miraculously returned. If the creature outside was indeed a wolf dog or feral dog that someone had abandoned, revealing Sonny's survival might inadvertently put him in more danger if the original owners were tracked down and were neglectful or cruel. And she certainly couldn't risk letting either cat outside again. The decision was clear, solidifying in her mind, even as she tended to Sonny's wounds. They were her cats now, both of them her responsibility. She would protect them, heal them, keep them safe within these four walls. There was no going back to leaving food on the porch, no going back to being a distant observer. She had crossed a threshold just as surely as Sonny had crossed hers, limping out of the wilderness and back into the world. Her quiet life had been irrevocably altered, her commitment absolute. This cabin was no longer just her sanctuary. It had to become an impregnable fortress for her small, unexpected family. The fight for their safety had just begun. The days following Sonny's return were a whirlwind of cautious nursing and heightened vigilance. Eleanor cleaned and bandaged Sonny's injured paw, coaxed nutrient-rich food into him, and kept both cats strictly indoors, constantly checking doors and windows. Sonny, despite his ordeal, recovered remarkably quickly. The warmth, regular food, and Shadow's constant affectionate presence seemed to heal his spirit as much as his body. Within a week, his limp was less pronounced, his coat regained some of its luster, and his adventurous spark, though dimmed by caution, began to rekindle. He explored the cabin, curiously batting at dust bunnies and occasionally engaging Shadow in a clumsy wrestling match. Seeing them together, curled up by the fire or chasing each other, playfully filled Eleanor with a deep sense of purpose. However, the threat outside remained. Eleanor found more tracks around the cabin perimeter several times. One morning, she discovered deep scratch marks on the sturdy wooden door of the shed, as if the creature had tried to claw its way in, perhaps remembering where Shadow had hidden. The incident solidified her fear. The predator was persistent, possibly becoming bolder or more desperate. As winter deepened, Eleanor became hyper-aware of her surroundings. She started documenting everything: the dates and times of track sightings, the scratch marks, any unusual sounds. She contacted Ranger Peterson again, relaying the new evidence of the creature's persistence near her home, though she still omitted Sunny's return, simply referring to her fear for the cat she had taken in, Shadow, and her own safety. The ranger was sympathetic, but explained resources were stretched thin, unless the animal showed direct aggression towards humans or livestock. Proactive trapping was difficult in such a large wilderness area. He suggested installing motion-activated lights or noise deterrents. Sometimes, he advised, making your property seem less appealing or more occupied can encourage nuisance animals to move on. Taking his advice, Eleanor ordered motion sensor floodlights online, her limited fixed income stretching to cover the cost. She also researched humane wildlife deterrents. Some articles suggested loud, sudden noises or strong, unpleasant scents could work. She recalled having an old air horn somewhere in the garage left over from Frank's boating days. She found it, tested it. The blast was deafening, making both cats jump. She also read about using ammonia-soaked rags placed around the property perimeter, though the logistics of maintaining that in the snow seemed difficult. Life inside the cabin became an odd mix of cozy domesticity and low-grade siege warfare. Eleanor spent hours watching the cats, marveling at their resilience. Sunny, while physically healing, showed signs of trauma. He avoided the back door area and would often stare intently into the woods from the window, his body tense. Shadow, conversely, seemed to blossom with Sunny back, becoming more confident and affectionate towards Eleanor, as if Sunny's presence reassured her that safety was possible. Yet Eleanor felt the pressure mounting. The constant vigilance was exhausting. What if the creature tried to break a window? What if it attacked while she was outside getting firewood? The isolation felt more profound, now not peaceful, but precarious. She had moments of intense doubt. Was she capable of protecting them? Was she putting herself in danger? This was her dark night of the soul. One particularly bleak evening, watching the snow fall heavily again, she felt overwhelmed, trapped. Maybe she should call a rescue organization, admit she couldn't handle it, let them take the cat somewhere safer. But the thought of separating them, of sending them away after everything they'd endured, felt like a betrayal. She looked at Sunny and Shadow curled together asleep near the hearth, a perfect picture of trust and companionship. No, she couldn't give up. She had to find a way. She decided to be more proactive, borrowing an idea from her late husband, who had sometimes used game cameras to track deer. She ordered a simple, inexpensive trail camera online. She mounted it discreetly on a tree overlooking the back of her property, hoping to finally get a clear look at the persistent visitor. Maybe identifying it definitively would help Ranger Peterson prioritize the case. A few days later, checking the camera's memory card, she finally saw it. The images captured in grainy infrared were chilling. It was indeed a large canine, powerfully built, but disturbingly thin. its ribs starkly visible beneath a thick, matted coat. Its features were a mix, the pointed muzzle and erect ears of a wolf, but the slightly broader chest and tail carriage hinted at domestic dog lineage, a wolf dog, almost certainly, and clearly starving. It paced restlessly in the images, sniffing intently at the shed door and the area around the cabin foundation. Seeing it confirmed her fears, but also hardened her resolve. This wasn't a wild wolf acting on instinct. This was likely an abandoned animal, a victim itself driven to desperate measures. That night, the scratching returned, this time at the back door again, more insistent, accompanied by low whines. The creature was getting bolder, perhaps smelling the cats inside, associating the cabin with a potential food source. Eleanor's heart pounded. She grabbed the air horn. This was it. It felt like the final act was approaching. She had her deterrence, her documentation, her fierce determination. The buildup of fear and tension had reached its peak. The next confrontation felt imminent, and she had to be ready. The confrontation came 2 nights later during a fierce windstorm that rattled the cabin windows and howled through the pines like a hungry beast. The wind masked smaller sounds, putting Eleanor even more on edge. Inside, Sunny and Shadow were restless pacing, nervously sensing the storm outside, or perhaps something more. Around midnight, above the roar of the wind, came a new sound, a loud splintering crash from the back porch. Eleanor's breath hitched. She grabbed the air horn and the heavy flashlight, her hand surprisingly steady. Shadow hissed and dove under the sofa. Sunny, however, stood near the living room entrance, tail twitching. Watching the back door with intense focus, Eleanor crept towards the kitchen, which overlooked the small enclosed back porch where she kept her firewood and bins. Peering cautiously through the kitchen window, she saw the source of the crash. The desperate wolf dog had managed to knock over the heavy wood bin, spilling logs across the porch. Now it was clawing frantically at the back door itself, leaving deep gouges in the thick wood, whining with a desperate, chilling intensity. It was trying to get in. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed it down, focusing on her plan. Direct confrontation was out of the question. She needed to scare it away decisively, remembering Ranger Peterson's advice and the deterrent articles. She knew sudden loud noise was key. She double-checked the back door lock. It was sturdy, bolted. Taking a deep breath, she braced herself, aimed the air horn towards the door, and pressed the button. The resulting blast was ear-splitting, amplified within the cabin walls. Outside, the wolf dog recoiled violently, yelping in shock and pain. It stumbled back from the door, shaking its head, confused and terrified by the sudden sonic assault. Eleanor didn't stop. She pressed the horn again, another long, piercing blast cutting through the storm's howl. The creature scrambled backwards off the porch, disappearing into the swirling snow and darkness beyond the range of the porch light. Eleanor stood trembling, listening. The scratching stopped. The whining stopped. Only the wind remained. Had it worked? Was it gone for good? Just then her phone rang, startling her. It was Ranger Peterson. Mrs. Vance Dispatch just got a call through. Your neighbor down the road reported hearing distress sounds like an animal caught or injured and what sounded like an air horn near your place. Is everything okay? Yes, I mean no. The wolf dog, it was trying to break down my back door. Eleanor stammered, relief washing over her. I used an air horn. I think I scared it off. "Okay, stay inside, lock your doors," the ranger said urgently. "There's a patrol vehicle not too far away responding to another call. I'll redirect them to you immediately. They might be able to track it now that it's been disturbed." Within 20 minutes, the reassuring blue and red lights of a Parks and Wildlife Patrol vehicle cut through the storm. Two rangers bundled against the cold approached the cabin cautiously. Eleanor, watching from the window, finally unlocked the door when they identified themselves. She quickly explained the situation, showing them the damage to the door and the images from her trail camera. Following the tracks leading away from the porch, aided by powerful flashlights, the rangers found the wolf dog huddled miserably in the snowdrift near the forest edge, whining pitifully. It was clearly terrified, exhausted, and non-aggressive now that its desperate attempt had failed. Using a catch pole, they were able to secure the animal without further incident. Definitely a wolf-dog hybrid. One of the rangers confirmed to Eleanor, severely malnourished. "Looks like someone dumped him out here. We'll take him to the county shelter, get him checked out. Hopefully, they can find a sanctuary placement for him." As the patrol vehicle drove away, taking the source of her terror with it, Eleanor felt an immense wave of exhaustion and relief wash over her. She bolted the door, then sank into her armchair. Sonny immediately jumped onto her lap, purring loudly, pressing his head against her chest. Shadow emerged from under the sofa and cautiously hopped up beside him, allowing Eleanor to stroke her soft fur. The ordeal was over. They were safe. In the weeks that followed, peace gradually returned to the small cabin, but it was a changed peace. Eleanor officially adopted Sonny and Shadow, registering them with the county buying proper collars, though the cat seemed perplexed by them. The cabin felt fuller, brighter. She repaired the back door, installed the motion-activated lights, and kept the air horn handy just in case. But the fear was gone, replaced by the quiet contentment of her unlikely little family. Sonny healed completely, his adventurous spirit returning, though he remained wary of the back door. Shadow blossomed into a confident, affectionate companion. Her earlier trauma fading in the security of her permanent home, and the constant presence of her brave brother Eleanor, found herself laughing more, talking constantly to her feline companions. Her solitude filled companionably. The wilderness outside remained wild, but within the sturdy walls of her cabin, Eleanor Vance, Sonny, and Shadow had weathered the storm and found their own safe harbor, forever bound by the terrifying night a wolf attacked and the unimaginable courage and resilience that followed.